Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the last day of the annual Governor's Office of Disability Affairs Conference. Our first session is educating students who are deaf and blind, and we have a great panel. Before we start our first panel, just want to thank the staff in the Governor's Office of Disability Affairs who have stuck it out through the last day and put together such a great conference. And also want to thank all of our staff within the Governor's Office and Governor Edwards for his support. And our partner, Deaf Focus, who has provided exceptional interpreting throughout the conference, and our presenters who have all volunteered their time and talent and experience to make this conference what it is. And so I will now turn it over to attorney and director, Ernest, who will be the moderator for this panel.
Good morning, everyone. And Bambi, thank you for that kind and warm welcome. This is a very important panel that we're featuring, and the title is Education of Deaf and Blind Students. We have a very distinguished panel, so much so that I provided the link to their full bios and their history of serving the needs into the description of in the chat box of our Zoom hearing today. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce I'd like to introduce the panelists, starting with Dr. Ashley Argrave. Pardon me one moment, I apologize. Okay, thank y'all for your patience and sorry for the inconvenience. Dr. Ashley Argrave is an educator, audiologist, advocate, trainer, and consultant. And she provides direct services to students while also providing special education, supporting training and consulting, specializing in deaf and hard of hearing students. We have Ms. Jana Brousard, who is the director for the Louisiana Commission for the Deaf. We have Ms. Christina Foolks. She is serving in the Calcasieu Parish School Board Department as the head of the deaf and hard of hearing and visually impaired programs. We have Mr. Superintendent Ernest Garrett, who is also on path to be a doctor very soon, so that title is gonna change. And he is the current superintendent of the Louisiana Special School District in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He also has a very distinguished past of serving the needs. So we want to encourage everybody to go check out the bios that's in the link. We have Dr. He's also on the path to get his doctorate. I don't know if he's still at it, Mr. Jimmy Gore. He's an advocate, teacher, inventor, author, community leader, and super proud father of two brilliant boys who are deaf. He was also featured in an earlier panel this week regarding accessibility for deaf and blind individuals. So thanks to Dr. Gore for participating once more. We also have Mr. Eric Guillory, who serves as an instructor at the Louisiana School for the Visually Impaired, and he is also a board member for, I believe, the Special School District in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So we want to welcome him. And we also have, a late addition to this panel, Mr. Taylor. I don't have your last name, so forgive me for not mentioning it, but that rounds out our very distinguished panel. And again, the bios for our panelists is in the chat box. This panel will be featured as a Q&A session. So we have some great questions that was presented, and we'd like to provide a few moments to kind of set some ground rules. Of course, if you have questions, please list them in the chat box, or if you're joining us via YouTube, please jot it down in the appropriate spot in the comments, and we will recognize you and you will get an opportunity to answer your question. And also you may raise your hand just if we somehow missed it. You may not be called on, but we will acknowledge your question. Okay, so let's get started. Do we have Jimmy Gore on with us?
Yes, this is Mr. Gore speaking. I'm here.
Okay, great. The first question goes to you. What is the importance of role models?
Hold for me. Okay, I'm ready. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I apologize. What is the importance of role models with respect to educating blind and deaf students?
Yes, to be honest with you, of course we need to have role model. For me, I've never taught a deafblind person myself. Perhaps other individual could answer that. But as for me, obviously, children need to have a role model who has, you know, to be there as their teacher, as I have myself. And for deaf children, I can answer your question related to deaf children, but not related to deafblind.
Greatly appreciate that response. Did you have any more details with in regards to your experience educating deaf students that you wanted to share in depth?
Yes, it's not simply teaching. Educating is not just teaching. It involves the entire school environment, the administrator, teachers, everyone who is part of the team is crucial. For example, social workers are required, and it's important to have a social worker. For example, I've worked with some in my classroom. I had children who had emotional disturbance, emotional issues, and they would be sent to the social worker. And it helps if the counselor, the social worker knew sign language, could communicate. It would be more efficient than if they didn't. There was difficulties communicating with that child and solving those problems. So it's a systemic issue. For example, I'm just giving you an example of a cake. You need to have specific ingredients to bake a cake. Every ingredient is important. If you miss one thing, if you're just missing the eggs, your cake is not going to rise properly, right? So it's the same thing in the school. You need to have all the experts in every field to make the teaching or educational experience successful. When it comes to deaf children, the education has to be visual. My research indicate, and my research obviously is still in progress, but it indicates that deaf children need to have visual education. The hearing education is substituted. For example, the English language, let's say you use the word "a dog runs." Oftentimes, deaf children will miss the word a because it's not something that exists in their language. It's something that's common in the English language. So you have to substitute it with visual clues. So that's how I teach, basically, to be able to deliver the entirety of the information visually. Sometimes deaf children can be frustrated by not being able to pick out those important clues. But if you have a very skilled and talented teacher, they can accomplish that. Just having a teacher who's certified and who knows some sign language is not enough. They have to be excellent. They have to be the entire environment has to be strong enough so that the children can thrive in the environment, just like my two sons did.
Gore, thank you for sharing your perspective. It's definitely unique, and I think you have a unique addition having two kids. And are they adults, or would you mind sharing their ages?
Yes, one is 31, one is 31 years old and graduate from college, and the other one is also recently graduated at 25. So yeah, 25 and 31 years old. They're doing well. They're having a great life. They're moving on with their life. I've watched them grow. Yeah, I'm very proud.
And that's evidence that your methods are very effective. And thank you for sharing that with our participants. I'd like to.
I would like to add one more thing. I've not only taught children here, but I've taught international students, foreign students several times. I've had classrooms of about 20 students in the past with coming from 7 different sign languages and backgrounds. And I had to teach them English based on 7 different backgrounds. So how do we present English? How do we teach them how to communicate effectively? Using movements and other methods, we were very successful.
Jamar, you're on mute.
I'm so sorry. I think that extra perspective really kind of brings it home that you've taught students from all walks of life, and especially from, people who aren't native to United States, and that's pretty awesome. I'd like to ask the same question to Mr. Guillory. Obviously, you have some experience in instruction. Sometimes the best education sometimes comes from outside of the classroom as well, from experiences. So, and again, Mr. Guillory, the question is, what is the importance of role models with respect to educating, in your position, blind and deaf students? And if you have experience with one or the other or both, please state just for the participants.
Certainly. Good morning, everyone. It's a privilege to be with you this morning. And I, as someone who happens to be blind myself, and as someone who has been in our field for more than 20 years, I am honored to have taught students who happen to be blind or low vision, as well as students who are deaf-blind. And as Mr. Gore said previously, every member of a student's educational team is so vitally important. Sometimes we don't think about folks who are providing related services, and of course, a student's first teachers, their parents, how important that is. And so having effective role models is so crucial, not only for the students and their educational progress, but also for the other members of a student's educational team. I have had so many parents in my career say, the fact that we saw you being successful really motivated us to advocate for our student. The fact that we saw that you could accomplish these things made us believe in the capability and the capacity of our child. And that is a very humbling, and it's just a very humbling thing to think about, because I'm nothing special. I'm someone who's an instructor who's trying to get students the skills and the high quality services they deserve. But absolutely, role models are so important across the educational team. And also with regard to students who happen to be deafblind, for instance, for them, communication can, of course, be a significant challenge. And so as someone who was fortunate because of role models in my own life to learn Braille at a very early age, I'm able to help students who are deafblind learn the Braille code and therefore become literate and become much more effective at communication. So role modeling is, of course, priceless. We cannot really quantify it. It's pivotally important. And I appreciate the attention this morning.
Appreciate having you. And every member of this panel is very important to where it brings awareness to the needs of our students in various systems. So As we know, we have representations from not only the Louisiana School for the Deaf and Visually Impaired, but through the public school system. So with that being said, I would like to get the perspective of Ms. Christa Foolks, if you're available. And again, the question is, what is the importance of role models with respect to educating blind and deaf students?
Good morning. Yes, having role models for our deaf and for our blind students are crucial. We have seen students, that haven't had much, that had many encounters, I should say, with other individuals with similar abilities. Okay, so we've had students that they may be the only deaf member in their whole town. And then we have some students that are the only blind member in their family and possibly their city. So for them to have access and for them to be able to communicate with someone that has similar background experiences, it's been a game changer for those students, because they see that, hey, there's someone that's like me. We're the same. I can be successful. I can do whatever it is that I want to do. I can go out and get a job. I can live independently. I don't have to stay at home with my parents or my aunt or my uncle for the rest of my life. Like, I can do whatever I want to do. And having that other person, that role model, sometimes, like I said, it's a life changer for them. I'll keep it short.
And we appreciate your contribution. So if a long answer is required, let us hear it. Okay, so I will direct this next question to someone who has experience dealing with the education of deaf and blind students on a daily basis. So the question that I want to ask Dr. Ernest Garrett would be, what are some approaches or strategies you use with deaf and hard of hearing students? And it could kind of be anything relative to their success or retention or otherwise.
Okay, so just to clarify the question that you're asking, you want me to identify strategies that I'm using for the success of our scholars? Is that what you mean?
Yes, it can be more like long-term strategic goals that you implement in your school system. Hands-on approach. So it's an open-ended, abstract question that that kind of you can use to let us share some of your strategies for success in educating your students.
Okay, thank you. I'll try my best to answer the question. First of all, good morning to everyone on the panel and attendees. I'm happy to be here. To speak of successes and what works, I like to go back to what's important about this week. July 26th is the 31st anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. When that act signed and was into law, I was 11. You can do the math to figure out how old I am today. So I'm using a combination of my life experience, my personal experience, but also my professional experience and carrying that with me through this education process. So as a student myself with a disability, I have experiences, and then working in the field of education. And many of you on the panel have been in a classroom. And so I have also been in a classroom as a social worker, helping to break down barriers to accessing the curriculum through the social emotional standpoint. So I think it's critical. One thing that's important is we're talking about the strategies and meeting the child where they're at and identifying their strengths and using that as a platform for creating an appropriate plan for their success. Can we spotlight superintendent, please? The interpreter does not need to be spotlighted, just superintendent.
Hi, everyone. We're having issues with YouTube. So we're just not going to spotlight anyone so everyone can see everyone on the screen. YouTube is interpreting to just show the person who is speaking. And we definitely want the interpreter to be seen on our YouTube streaming. So we'll keep everyone on the screen for the YouTube screening so the interpreter will be there.
Okay. All right, I'll go ahead and proceed. So as superintendent here now for the Louisiana Special School District, I have encountered a unique opportunity in looking at my experience as a scholar and then as a leader in organizations, in particular in educational organizations. Previously, I was superintendent for another school for the deaf, and I was able to look at the school system at serving students who are deaf and hard of hearing and students also who are blind. And I've had a seat at the table. And when I arrived here, I had a unique opportunity to really delve into Louisiana Special School District and discern what special opportunities do we have to transform and elevate the system, to improve the system, to result in positive outcomes for students with disabilities. So that is where my work continues. I know that for students to be successful, we must have a system that is designed to fit and meet their needs. And so we use best practices in the field of education. And we also need to have competent and qualified leaders to provide direction and qualified teachers to provide instruction that fits in with the trends and needs for success in the workplace today. So that's part of my work and part of my challenge and my vision for the scholars. So one thing I can say is because of COVID, that exposed that there's so much work left to be done. In 31 years of ADA, there have been many amazing success stories. At the same time, there's more work to do. So I understand and appreciate identifying the solution for scholars with disabilities. Takes really a village. It really takes a village. And so we can't just do it as one person. That would be impossible. So one thing I emphasize with my team is I cannot do this alone. I need to partner with others. So we have the same thing in Department of Ed and other stakeholders and allies in the community. All have to work together and create a system of support around our scholars. So as a deaf leader and a leader with a disability, I've identified through COVID that our scholars and their social emotional needs have been impacted through the pandemic and lack of access because of technology barriers and limitations. They've had communication and access to information barriers. So I just want to make it clear that the education inequities exist in virtual learning environments for some students with disabilities. And the last thing I want to say about that is I want to recognize that it's not a one size fits all. So how we approach education is not the thought that everyone has the same cookie cutter education. And so it's critical that we look at a student with a disability. We're providing a free and appropriate public education with the least restrictive environment. And so that's critical to remember. And so I appreciate this work and recognize that this work continues.
Great. And I just want to say, I've gotten to know you over the last couple of months, and I greatly appreciate what you bring to the table for the state and for the students, your outstanding leadership. We're glad to have you where you are in a position to serve our students.
Thank you.
So your resume speaks for itself, and as does the other panelists. So I want to direct this next question to Dr. Ashley Argrave. So we talked about the role of educators and strategies. So I want to kind of continue that discussion. And here's the question. How can we work together to ensure that more blind and deaf children have opportunities to receive an education that prepares them for high school graduation, education after high school, and are prepared for jobs of the 21st century?
Good morning. This is Ashley. Thanks for that question. I think that collaborating, as Mr. Garrett had said previously, is so important in that role. I think for myself, I work with many districts across the state in ensuring that all deaf and hard of hearing students have access to education. And so, in furthering that, I have been working with not just teachers, for example, having maybe a 1-week session with teachers and showing them strategies of how to improve visual education for their students, since I'm not there all the time, so working with districts and being able to be successful at that, but also allowing parents to be able to join in those sessions and having parents to see like, oh, this is a strategy that we can use. Recently, I had a student who was 3 and she's just learning sign. And so the student's goal was to try to make decisions and showing mom, okay, when you're making decisions, you have to have one decision over here and another decision over here so that there's space for deaf and hard of hearing students. And that was something that had never been shown to mom. And she's with the child all day long. So I think that, allowing parents and being able to share information in different areas. So having, speech therapists and audiologists and administrators also understanding the needs of those students, educating them, providing resources for them to also be able to give education to those students. So I just think that collaboration with everyone really leads to the success of those students.
Great. And I appreciate what you're saying in your comments. And can you, and also I just want to kind of ask a question. Can you tell me some or discuss if you have experience with ensuring that school boards on a local level are meeting needs and expectations? And if you have, can you share your experiences in working with them?
So I think it's important. I mean, I work with a lot of different districts, some that are doing things really well, some that still have room for improvement in areas. And I think it's important to go in as a support system and not as you're doing this wrong, Everyone's learning. I'm still learning, and I was raised by 2 deaf parents my entire life. So I feel like as someone who is in this field with a master's in education and doctorate in audiology that like I'm still learning. And so I think that it's necessary to give grace where needed, and that in moving forward, just continuing to show support. So as opposed to kind of going in and critiquing everything that school districts may be doing, offering support, saying like, hey, we notice that there's room for improvement in this area, and we actually have a training in these areas. Listening to school systems, I think, is really important. I've had, a lot of issues with, say, the support staff on those districts not being fluent in sign language. So as opposed to of going in and just like, critiquing everyone and their language skills, saying, hi, we're going to have an ASL improvement class for these people, or, having a guide towards educators or geared towards raising their EIPA standards. So I think there's just a lot of opportunity to be able to support school systems and school districts in a, collaborative, supportive way, as opposed to maybe a different approach.
Okay. But I greatly appreciate that perspective. I want to direct our next question to Ms. Jana Brousard, who is the interim director for Louisiana Commission for the Deaf. And in doing so, I just want to really celebrate your, and I know your road to being included into the disability community is non-traditional. You have, you've learned sign language in elementary school after getting to know a classmate who was deaf, and you have a well-rounded experience through various roles that serving as an interpreter and through leadership in so many different capacities. So I want, as I say all that, I want to ask this question. What can be done to reach out to parents, families, and the blind and deaf communities to involve them more in education and support of blind and deaf children? And in your response, please tell us what works and what challenges you face.
Sure, thank you, Jamar, for that introduction. Yes, my name is Jana. It is very interesting sometimes when I look back at, I guess the course of events of life, I always like to say, God has a plan that we don't always know about, but, to think just a conversation with a friend in third grade, of wanting to learn sign language would lead me to this position all these years later. But so thank you for that introduction. I'm glad you asked that question because it really piggybacks a little bit on Dr. Argrave's answer, which is, it is so important. We have a kind of an internal saying within the commission and then the broader Bureau of Family Health, which is help people do the right thing. So I firmly believe that, people aren't intentionally doing the wrong thing. I think they just don't know, they don't know what to do and they don't know how to do it. And so that outreach, generally speaking, and education of individuals is so incredibly important. Establishing different events, a variety of events, not things that are just kind of catered to this one particular topic, but ensuring that you have some sort of, if you're looking at it from a school district standpoint, for example, even from a teacher standpoint, that there are things that are going on that you can draw people into that they would be interested in coming and learning more about. Going back again to what Dr. Argrave said, and doing it in a way that's collaborative and supportive, and not, kind of negative and like, you need to come to this thing, right? Because you're doing it wrong. It's like, how can we work together to do the right thing for these students? I think one of the challenges for sure that we see a lot in the commission when it comes to outreach is basically, where are the people? Just where are they and how do we find them? It's not like, deaf or blind people are just signing their name up on a registry so that the whole state knows exactly where they live. It would be nice if it was that easy and we knew exactly where to go, but especially in kind of your rural areas, you don't know. Are there students out there who are on an island? Are they isolated? who are they and where are they and how can we reach them is probably one of the most challenging parts. But, again, I think it's like being intentional about establishing events or something like that you can put out there via social media, email, listservs, putting it on your website and just word of mouth, that collaboration effort. We're all in this together. It really is a small community, yet a large community sometimes when you really think about it. But, sharing that information with each other with the intention of saying, we want to include you. We want to help you. We, even maybe not say help, but we want to include you and we want to make sure that we're all doing the right thing. And really the only way to achieve that is by doing it together. So yeah, I would definitely say outreaches, intentional community outreaches is probably one of your best strategies at this point. And then now, because of COVID, with everything being virtual, there's actually a benefit here of reaching people in areas that perhaps we haven't been able to before.
Great. Thank you for sharing that perspective. I want to ask if we have any one of our scholars that's currently enrolled in school participating on our panel. Taylor Franks, are you on with us?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you, Taylor, for joining us. We certainly are grateful for your perspective, especially as a student, and we want to broaden our understanding more by having your perspective in this space. So I wanted to ask, on behalf of our participants, kind of your thoughts on being ready to be, I guess, being prepared for job entry into the workforce, especially the jobs of the 21st century. In your opinion, do you feel prepared to enter in the workforce immediately after graduating? Or is there a certain point to where you may feel comfortable entering the workforce? Would you mind, I guess, expanding on that topic?
Yes, sir. So me personally, I believe that I was taught enough to be prepared. It's ironic that you asked me this question because I just got my first job. So I just got my first job and I believe that I'm pretty prepared for it because I had amazing role models like y'all had talked about at the beginning. I had amazing teachers. I had actually amazing students that have graduated before me to look up to. And also just had like a good education, and the O&M taught me a lot about advocating for myself and like just being out in the real world. For each person, it is different though. Some students might have to go to a place like in Reston or in Lafayette, that ABL. So it just depends on the person, but I personally believe that I was prepared enough, and I believe that if you are a visually impaired or hearing impaired individual, that it would benefit to go to a school like LSDVI because they do prepare you a lot more and you get exposed to more of a like culture geared more towards your disabilities, and they also are like very geared to your needs as a person, and like they teach each student different.
Okay. And thank you, Taylor, for sharing that experience. And just know that the question relative to role models was specifically for you. I just wasn't sure that you were on or not. But I'm glad that you talked about it to the extent that if you wanted to expound more about the importance of role models, specifically to your situation, please share if you like.
Yeah, I had a lot of role models. Like, I have been at LSBI since I was in 3rd grade, and I'm a senior this year. So I've had a lot of people in and out, you know, helping, but the superintendent Garrett, he's been a very good role model for me, because it really, he talks to the students and treats them in a way that is very respectful and honorable. And he really respects and really thinks of the students on a higher level. And just, he's a very good role model for me. And so most of the teachers have really prepared me, like my Braille teacher, she's really prepared me to go out to college next year. Also things like LRS are really like helpful for blind and deaf students that are about to graduate. And just there's a lot of, like I said, the teachers, the past students and students that are now attending LSBVI are very good role models for me and probably other students.
Great, and I would love to hear more about your plans next phase when you go to college. You know, we love to feature you in our newsletter and share your success with our statewide community. And we thank you for participating in this conference. It's very important to have a youth perspective, especially in this space where we're discussing education. So thank you, and we value your input and everything you contributed to this panel. Of course, we may have another question for you if we have time. I want to direct this next question to Dr. Ernest Garrett. And it deals with the importance of diversity. So what are your, I'm sorry. What can be done to recruit and employ teachers, especially those from a multicultural background and with the lived experiences with a disability? In your response, please describe what works and what are the challenges.
Okay, I'm happy to provide a response for that question, tying into the question of role models as well. The benefit of having representation of people who look like the people they serve is important. Within special education, it's difficult to identify people who have specialist training and certification to meet the needs of the various needs of students. However, I'm not running away from any challenge. What I do is view an organization and a system and the culture of that system and see what are the hiring and retention practices embedded in that organization and what do they look like? And where do the opportunities exist to assess where that can be transformed to reflect the values of the organization? And so I use SSD as an example. I formerly worked for a special school district in St. Louis, the St. Louis County, and the culture, and learned the culture of that organization. And moving to Louisiana, I see the special school district here at the state level, and the culture is very interesting. Often, I find the representation in leadership matters, meaning Leaders who reflect the population they serve often influences an organization to recruit and retain folks who serve the interest of the population. So I challenge my HR department to become more intentional in making sure that our hiring practices and processes are fair, balanced, and truly we try to recruit. And sometimes what that means is we need to be innovative in our outreach. We need to have a strong network. For example, I often mention CEASD, the Conference of Educational Administrators for Schools and Programs for the Deaf. And there are organizations like OSB, the Council, or COSB, the Council for Schools for the Blind. So there are pools and networks of talent that can help identify talent. Sometimes HR departments in general are looking for too general of a special education instructor, but we need specialists. And we need to take sometimes more personal approach to recruiting as well. At the end of the day, an organization needs talent to meet their goals. And I always have the standpoint of we are in the business of educating students with disabilities. And the end goal for that, the end goal is to make sure that we are graduating scholars who are ready to meet the challenges of the day. In the 21st century, we have sophisticated and technology savvy society. And what that means for those the needs are those with the skill set. Like Taylor mentioned, and that really was touching that she identified me as a role model. Thank you, Taylor. And the point of that, regardless, I may not be blind or have a visual impairment myself, I'm deaf, but we have a common disability experience. And for that purpose, what would it look like if our special school district signaled to the community and signals to the students that really to the state as well, we welcome people with diversity, talents, cognitive abilities. We welcome you as long as you have the skill sets needed. And one last point about that, the other piece as well, in my experience, and I've been in several different organizations where people are hesitant to interact with me because I'm different. I need an interpreter or what have you. Exposure is so important. The more exposure people have, the less fear and intimidation people have. It's all about interacting, increasing access to people who may not look like you, may not think or feel like you, but that's all right. We're all members of the human race, and we need to reflect that in schools. When students graduate, they're ready to work in the workplace with whoever they encounter in life. So that's what I have to say.
Great, and it's a very important topic, and of course, like you said, it's very important for students to see their staff and administrators, people who look like them, to the extent that there's some diversity, because it's a bigger world out there. And I know that, for instance, Mr. Gore, who's from Boston, and he's a Celtic and Red Sox, and you're from St. Louis, and you've been around the country, and you've seen and interacted with different people from all walks of life. So I'm glad that you're bringing these experiences to Louisiana. What I want to do is give everyone the floor, all of our panelists, to answer this question. It's twofold. The question is, what do you want individuals to know about your experience? Whether you're deaf, whether whether you're blind, whether you're deaf-blind, or you're just an individual in the capacity serving the needs. And in answering, please provide some guidance or some perspective of what they can do to help advocate for the needs of, and for the purposes of educating individuals who are blind or deaf-blind. And if you need me to repeat the question, I'll be more than happy to do so. Give me a chance to clean it up a little bit, actually.
This is Ashley. I'm happy to respond. So I hear a couple different questions in there. I just kind of wanted to like piggyback off of Mr. Garrett a minute ago as talking about like just leadership and roles. And I know that I serve in a different capacity as whereas Christa and lots of other people here in a mainstream setting, which would be, you know, students out in their regular school systems. And I think that it's important to take opportunities when you have those and make connections with other, you know, deaf or blind people out in the community so that they can come and speak to your students. For example, you know, this past summer, I had the opportunity to work with a class of kids in extended school year, and many of them probably had not met any deaf or hard of hearing adults or leaders. And so as someone who's a child of a deaf adult, I was able to bring my parents in, and they were able to do lessons and be role models for my students, as well as other deaf individuals who were business owners in our community. And those are just in like our community, like imagine, you know, expanding that out. And so it just, it like brightened up my students to like learn like, oh, same, like you could see them just become so inspired as opposed to just myself teaching them, oh, hearing whose signs and that's it. You know, like it was just a different connection. I think that's important for anyone out in a regular school system to make sure that you're using those opportunities to expose those kids to other deaf leaders in the community. I'm not, I can't remember the rest of your question. It was so long.
The other part was what could those individuals who you're sharing your perspective with can do to advocate and support the ongoing needs of educating students in, who are blind and deaf, or right. Blind, deaf, or deaf-blind, excuse me.
And that's a great question as far as advocacy. And I think that starts at an early age. For example, in some public school systems, say if like the interpreter is not going to be there that day, some districts have the tendency of kind of being like, oh, well, we don't need to get an interpreter. This kid's only 4. This kid's only 5, you know, like, and not thinking that that's an important part of their education. And I've had to kind of advocate for students this year and just letting them know, like, it's not just the fact that they have an interpreter. That is a huge part of it, but it's not just the fact that they have an interpreter. We are showing them right now that if an interpreter does not show up, that they need to ask for one, that they deserve one, and that they're, you know, they just, like that's part of who they are, like to the core, to be able to provide accessibility. And then so I think that's so important to advocate for those students and show them how to advocate for themselves at a young age, so that when they go through high school, they're able to advocate for themselves. And then hopefully through transition and out into the real world, you know, when they're approached in situations where they don't have access, that they're able to be great leaders like the ones here in our meeting, and they can advocate for themselves, whether it be having an interpreter at a doctor's appointment, or whether it be at the Capitol, you know, in front of legislation, trying to get bills passed for accessibility.
That's very important that everyone participates in the session. It's a lot of things move and decided, and you know, I know Dr. Gore has been a mainstay at our legislative in legislative sessions. He has his hand up, so I'll give respectfully give him the floor.
Okay. Oh, my turn. Yes. Right? Is it my turn?
Yes.
This is Jimmy speaking. Okay, sure. As I actually said, you know, 30-year-old child, not knowing about him. If you just leave that alone, so there's no interpreter. Let's reverse the situation. Let's say there's a group of deaf kids and the teacher's signing, and the hearing student is in that situation, and they have a voice interpreter. Oh no, we don't need a voice interpreter. How would that child feel in that situation? They'd be lost. They'd be confused. They'd be stressed out, emotional. So it's very important to know that, for one. And recently, two students who graduated from Louisiana School for the Deaf presented, and it was absolutely chilling. I wish they would have been here to share their experiences. Having been in mainstream school for 6 years, and then frustrated, and then moving to LSD, the feeling of how their eyes were opened and how impactful it was that they got to see what they had lost from being in mainstream schools. Those are the voices we need to be listening to. Those are the experiences that have been through the situation and experienced the new environment. And, you know, those students were successful, and they made the grades, and it's important. The schools in Louisiana, the center for resources and everything certified needs to be Louisiana School for the Deaf. It has been for many, many years, since 1908 or 1918, somewhere, but many years. They have years of experience, and the mainstream schools should be reaching them as the experts in the field. They should be reaching out to other schools, not just, you know, they need to be bringing their kids to the school environment so they can see the environment and everything. And often that doesn't happen. Mainstream kids just go through life not having any idea. They need to be able to see that what it is. And the students, those two students who graduated, their message was really powerful. If you can watch that video, it's very important to realize that public schools and the Louisiana Deaf School for the Deaf need to be working together as opposed to having this barrier, because we do have deaf role models. And as Ernest said, you know, they're there. A lot of places they're not available. We need to find somewhere where there's a deaf person to work with as a role model. That's really all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Gore, for that perspective. And I have two comments. One, Mr. Landon, we believe something may be wrong with your microphone. The audio is coming out a bit choppy. Second, there's a question from one of our GACTA council members to ask, and anyone please feel free to take this question. Here's the question. Much of education research talks about kids needing to learn to read as early as possible. At what age / grade do most deaf, blind students typically learn to read? And how does that compare with regular ed students?
This is Eric. I can address that inquiry if it's all right.
Great.
So it really depends on the nature of an individual's deaf blindness. Like, for instance, in the case of Usher's syndrome, where an individual may experience hard of hearing or deafness far earlier than visual impairment, or visual impairment that is significant. So a lot of folks who are deafblind may learn to read print and use sign commensurate with their peers. But as vision progressively diminishes, that's when the challenges come in terms of learning Braille literacy and other blindness technologies that will allow for connectivity throughout life. And so for some of those learners, some of those scholars and students, literacy issues don't manifest themselves to a significant degree until perhaps the teenage years or into a person's 20s or 30s. But that's where proactive planning, that's where looking into a long range educational plan for those scholars is so important.
Great. And again, that was a question from the chat, and thank you, Eric, for responding. Are there any other questions that I may have missed? Individuals who are on YouTube or participants on the Zoom. If there are any, please let me know. Any GODA staff that's on right now, please intervene.
More. We had a comment from Tony Medlin, who said Baton Rouge Community College is instituting an ASL studies program and an agreement for transfer to a 4-year program. The classes begin the spring semester of 2022. And then someone from YouTube asked, can BRCC provide the information for registration to the attendees as well as the school systems? And I see Jana has her hand up to answer.
Sure, I'll take just a moment to answer as best as I can, at least. So the commission was made aware of Baton Rouge Community College and their desire to establish this 2-year ASL studies program. As a matter of fact, the commission board is currently writing a letter of support to the Board of Regents to ensure that this program can get launched, with the hope that eventually it can move into perhaps a 4-year university with some, what we would like to see is the commission would like to see with an emphasis on some interpreter training programs there. As far as the registration, unless I'm speaking out of turn, it is not until spring of 2022. So that's another year or so from now. I don't know if they have anything officially ready yet for someone to go in to register or to look just yet. But if I'm wrong, please, by all means, if anyone who's watching could put some more information into the chat box.
I love that. That is, and I'd be interested in enrolling myself. That is awesome of BRCC. I'm an alumnus of BRCC. I'm proud to say that. So yeah, I will be happy to share any information once available. Bambi will agree in our newsletter to get that word out. And also another shameless plug. Of course, we want to extend all of our panelists. As you know, we have GACTA, the Governor's Advisory Council on Disability Affairs, to participate in our education, accessibility committees, subcommittees, and any other committees that they feel compelled to participate on to help move things forward as we're still here under the administration of John Bell Edwards. So that information will always be seen on our website and on our newsletters and from our email traffic. So please put your email in our listserv on the governor's webpage so you get access to our newsletters if you haven't already. It looks like we've reached our time for this conference, for this panel. I want to thank everybody who participated and all of our distinguished panelists who have provided some really great information for this very important topic that should continue to occur. And of course, we want to ensure that everything that we talked about continues to be made known, the importance of awareness. And again, everything that we talked about in our GACTA meetings is of big relevance to this panel session. So again, thank you. Our next session, Voting Accessibility, will begin promptly at 10:30, and it will feature Ms. Michelle Bishop, Toy Roca, and Maria Town. So we have a very good distinguished panel there. So we encourage you to stick around and we will go offline for about 25 minutes. Again, thank y'all, and we hope that y'all can continue to participate in this conference.
Thank you, Jamar, and thank you all of the panelists. Just if I can give a little bit of information about the recording of our conference, because I think there's many people here who are deaf and may need ASL interpreting to access our recordings. We are posting online the full day recording of our conference, which that includes just as you're seeing it on YouTube with the interpreter. Unfortunately, probably from my lack of technical knowledge, our recordings from Zoom as individual sessions are not always showing the interpreter. So there's two versions of every session that's posted on YouTube. And the full day has the interpreter. The other one may or may not, depending on my technological challenges. Just want to give that information out to everyone, and we'll share that in the written information we send out to all the people who registered. So thank you guys. Our next session starts at 10:30, and thanks to Jamar for moderating this great panel.
Thank you.